reference to the accusing of others, as appears with her pronouncedly. In all other respects, this is an arrant violation of the rules of regulation, as a given to the group. Jacobus must also still be mentioned, and also for him, I could only set a time limit up to Quetzal's return. His constant expressions regarding murdering and killing can in no way be reconciled with the teaching and its observance. But it must also be said to him, like with Madeline, and this for the last time, that he in no way has to interfere in the affairs of your and your wife's children. At least at present, these are still developing exactly according to our conceptions and in accordance with all that we hope for. This must not continue to be endangered. Jacobus is to align his thoughts on this and is also to refrain from his belligerent speeches against us, for now he, too, truly stands on the last branch, which has, moreover, become rather thin. This is also valid in reference to dealing with the other group members. These are the concerns for him, where still those things appear, which I already mentioned. It also applies to Elsie to fix all those irregularities and objectionable things, as I have already cited them. In addition to all this, there still comes the fact that the problem with the procreation of progeny cannot be solved, which is why the High Council has worked out another possibility, in the event that everything can still be continued. On the one hand, the problem of the procreation of progeny cannot be solved because flashes of jealousy result from this in different group members, which would come to degeneracy if this option were to be truly taken into consideration. As our clarifications showed, a destruction of the group would be the consequence because several group members would not be able to cope with the solution, even though it is the only one that would have been of absolutely secure value. But on the other hand, our analyses also showed that a suitable virgin or even two of these are not findable, who could take on this task in obligation. In the group itself, only a single virgin is to be found, who would not be up to the psychological burden of such a task. However, other virgins, unfortunately, cannot be found in the group because the female group members are either already mothers or else unmarried persons who already lost their virginity years ago. For this reason, the only possibility that still remains open, as mentioned to us by the High Council, is for an additional, secondary group to be formed, whose members exceed the number of 49 and who are not included in everything in the strict form like the actual internal core group. The new, enlarged group to be formed can comprise several hundred members, but it is also incorporated into the statutes like also all other group members in the internal and external area. In this connection, you have to prepare extended statutes, but in the extensions, you must also incorporate the set obligations in accordance with the already existing statutes. With regard to the neglect of the use of the Saha Center, a duty must be introduced again because the release of the use has led with practically all group members to very negative values and to indifference, with only very few exceptions. I can give you a 14-day period for the plan determination relating to this, after I have transmitted this report to you. After that, I have to exchange a corresponding element in the control device, which will be programmed according to the data to be submitted to me. This element will then be coupled with an automatic control mechanism, which is programmed on the thought impulses of the individual group members and also on the group member candidates, and which automatically sets a corresponding circuit in function for the elimination of all values in the central piece if an unjustified and illogical absence to an exercise or registration occurs, but this also applies to a storage. This apparatus works in such a way that it is able, in its half-organic operation, to find out genuine illness symptoms, evasions, and untrue information absolutely logically and independently, in order then, accordingly, to set a corresponding circuit into function, which regulates the broad storage or the elimination of all data and forces. So in the future, if anyone stays away from the Saha Center without a logical reason, so therefore, not as a result of truthful illness, non-availability for some compelling reason, nausea, or self-unintentional delay, then the individual's entire storage will be eliminated by that person, according to which the further use of the Saha Center by the same becomes completely unnecessary because he or she will no longer be able to achieve successes therein, for which the control disk is also programmed. But this also means that all the forces of an incarnation storage would likewise be eliminated in such a case, whereby these then also fall out. This rule applies until everything is actually regulated. That's how we must act now, unfortunately, even if it seems very drastic. Due to the grossly negligent disregard, no other option remains open. But this also means that Jacobus must now educate himself on punctuality, because now, only a delay of 6 minutes is accepted by the new regulation, according to which after this time, an introduction into the center would be pointless. The times given for the meditative exercises and storages remain the same, namely in such a way as they are given to you. What isn't functioning properly yet, with regard to the Saha Center, is that it now also finally has to be understood by the responsible persons that they have to turn off their thoughts during the introduction of persons into the Saha Center, which isn't done, unfortunately. Quetzal has, indeed, invented and installed a suitable safeguard, which absorbs such forces, but there is still constantly the risk that through the thoughts of the one introducing, some unpleasant incidents or damages will appear. For this reason, the one introducing should also ensure that nothing is spoken during the bringing in and the bringing out, and if this must happen, nevertheless, then it should only be done in a very quiet tone, but this should also be avoided if possible because they aren't of the fortune to inhibit their thoughts under a blockade, as you are able to do. You and also all group members, you all now have to be very clearly aware that I am explaining all this to you on my own responsibility and that I still have absolutely no assurance that Quetzal, Patar, Semyaza and, above all, the High Council are also in accordance with this action. But I give you and the group members my word that I will support you all up to the last possibility, but only under the reservations mentioned. I really cannot do more, which you must understand. However, I am very well in a position to be allowed to suppose that I will have success. If this happens, then I will transmit our current conversation to you, which should then be the sign for you that I had success. If I would not achieve this, then I would come to you once again because I would then still like to discuss various matters with you. Billy says, girl, you're a true piece of gold, only now do I know why those among us speak of black gold, but they don't know that there is such a one that is 1,000,000 times more valuable than any oil. Ah, and you've maintained such a long speech, a true marathon achievement. But, damn, I don't know how to thank you. Oh, come, you black golden star. Meier says, oh, you are so sweet and so very happy. Now, it is very much easier for me. Very dear thanks, my dear friend. Billy says, I warned you once before of such a chain reaction. Meier says that wasn't disagreeable to me, and I am very pleased about it. Somehow, I feel more lively and freer than during the last 60 minutes. Billy says, certainly, Black Golden Star, so it is with me, too. I feel somehow happy and freer again. Well, before I now undertake something, I'll wait for so long until you announce yourself again to me. My preparing any new, additional statutes, etc. before that probably makes no sense. Or what do you think about it? Meier says, I am of your view. Billy says, well, then for the time being I won't tell much about our conversation, because if everything still goes wrong, then it isn't necessary for the hot soup to be placed on the table. But now, would it still be possible for you to answer 1 or 2 to 3 questions for me? Meier says, I will do that very gladly, and just today and now, this gives me special joy. Billy says, dear thanks, Black Golden Star. You know, I'm sure, that some lessons or messages should have been transmitted to me recently by Arahat Athasafa and by the Patail level, but this hasn't happened so far. Can you tell me what's going on there? Meier says due to the unpleasant circumstances so very well known to you, it was ordered by the High Council for these additional transmissions to be cancelled for the time being, and it is even questionable whether they will ever still be released. It was explained that it would be pointless to continue to release the lessons and various other things from these levels if these wouldn't be respected, as this has happened in a determining form by the group members, who are, first and foremost, always used for comparisons. The regulation relating to this is that the group members will be rated in accordance with their evolution, and after that, a decision will be made. If it is found that the group members, in accordance with their evolution, are not yet able to process and follow the intended lessons, etc., then this certainly cannot be the case for the rest of earthly humanity, because this possesses much less knowledge with regard to all these things. Therefore, the group and its members act as the true measure, according to which it, therefore, decides whether the earthly humanity shall move forward in consciousness evolution or still live in stagnation in this regard for a very long time. Billy says, so that's how it is. I did not know that, at least not in the full frame. Then I have a somewhat complicated question. Through various calculations, I have, another time, encountered the fact that something cannot be right with the dimensions of our present, from this to the Centaurus groups as well as to Lyra and Vega and even to the Pleiades. According to my calculations, these suns and planets addressed, of which there was already often talk between Semyaza, Quetzal and me as well as between Ptah and me, would really have to be in other dimensions, as it was said to me repeatedly. This would, therefore, actually mean that their Lyra and Vega human beings and still some others, are just as non-existent in our present dimension as also the Pleiadians and the Centaurus human beings. And if my calculations are right, then you all would have to live just a fraction of a second in the future to our space-time configuration, which for us, however, results in a difference of several thousand years, with regard to technological development. But how this is connected, that is a riddle to me, and it could even be very difficult to understand. But Ptah once spoke of the fact that on that or on a planet of the Centaurus groups, a people lives in overpopulation, which comprises about 120 billion, so these, then, would have to live in the future, as seen by us. On the other hand, I also calculated that at that time, around 22 million years ago, when the events took place in the Lyra and Vega area, which eventually led to the visits to our Earth, at that time, through some skillful manipulations, the Lyra and Vega refugees fell into the past and so penetrated into our space-time level. With certainty, this was no so-called chance but rather a full calculation. This arose from my contemplation of the fact that the technology of your ancestors was already so far developed at that time that these would have tracked and found the refugees with certainty. But since that was not the case, the refugees must have retreated into areas that fell outside of the control of the pursuers. But concerning this, there are only two possibilities, so namely the past or the future. But as I know the things now, the refugees weren't able to venture into the future, so only the past remained open to them, to where they then actually also retreated. And because the past comprises millions of years and even billions of years in a life potential form, the pursuit was given up, but this, in turn, means that the technology of your ancestors was not yet developed so far that they would have been able to carry out detections in the areas of the past or the future. But I now know from Ptah's great spacer that this is possible for you today and that you know how to locate any structural vibration in any area of the past or future within seconds on the basis of computer analysis. Meier says, how did you reach these results? Billy says, through various calculations, when I grappled with the expansion rate and, thus, also with hyperspace, normal space, and with time, as well as with the pertinent information and remarks from Semyaza, Ptah, Quetzal, and Askit. Meier says that is amazing, and I already heard about your calculations. But that you have now found out even these things, this may very well surpass everything else. Your statements up to the last fully agree with the actual events. My dear friend, I would like to own your head. Billy says, you're exaggerating once again, my black golden child. Meier says, those are my sincere thoughts. I now suppose that you will even understand the issues surrounding space shifts and time shifts when I explain this to you in detail, about which you would have to preserve silence, however, under all circumstances. Only, there is, indeed, no longer enough time for that today, for I now must say goodbye. I have considered some things during the last minutes, which I will very well take to hand in such a way as I have worked them out myself. But I will give you my word that I will still explain to you the details about space and time and the shifts under all circumstances, no matter what will happen. If you want this. Billy says, but of course. Then now, farewell, you most lovable, terrific creature of the universe. And please see to it that you convey all my loving greetings, quite especially to Semyaza, and wish her a speedy recovery. Meier says, you are very sweet, and I know exactly what you feel for a human being when you give him or her your peculiar pet names. Go in joy and peace, and be assured that I will do my best. Till we meet again, my dearest friend. Billy says, oh, very dear thanks, you lift me into the sky. Bye, girl, Black Rose, terrific creature. Bye. Meier says, till we meet again. This is my most beautiful day here on Earth, really. It is worthwhile to do my best. Meier says once again, I must come back, for I failed to explain several important things to you in connection with the expansion of a new group beyond the 49 and for the simplified developmental work for the first group. Quetzal decided, due to advice from the High Council, that in the future, for the remaining developmental time of 5 years, no tests for admission into and use of the Saha Center will be required for candidates of the internal group. However, a good study of the entire teaching and an appropriate training in this are to be completed. During the first period, the Saha Center is to be used by the newcomers only for meditative purposes, and then, after 6 months, the storage is to be carried out. The times for the meditation and the storage remain the same, to the extent that only a slight change appears, namely as follows: internal time data and rules of behavior. Otherwise, the explanations apply, which I have already given. Billy says, then I am to procure for you, or rather for us, a suitable clock. Is that what you mean? Meier says, I spoke of that, yes. Billy says, then I still have a question regarding non-core group members. How does it stand with these, with regard to the meditation? Meier says the statutes remain valid, as they are given. Billy says, and what about the members of the expanded, external group? Meier says these also fall under the statutes in full. An exemption from the tests and the corresponding waiting periods of 6 or 24 months only applies to the internal core group of 49 persons, which is responsible for all duties specified in the statutes and also for the 2-time participation in the group meetings each month. Billy says, and when should the new regulation take place now, with regard to the Saha Center? Meier says, I already told you that you have a 10 to 14-day time period for the determination of times for the individual group members after I will transmit the report to you. During this time, however, the only ones who may use the Saha Center are those whose times are constant in the future, when the time measuring device should already be in operation. So this means that from the point in time of the utilization of the time-measuring device on the use times of the Saha Center, these will be registered automatically and individually for the individual users, and these may then be kept in the future and may no longer be changed. Exceptions for the non-use of the Saha Center are only valid in the context of that which I have explained with regard to the self-deciding machines. Omissions of all illogical kinds lead to the fact that after 3 such incidents, the whole storage of the person concerned becomes completely eliminated by automatic means, after which any further use of the Saha Center becomes senseless and pointless for this person in the mentioned relation. Billy says that should be clear and should also be understood. So reasons for absence are only valid if these reasons are based on a logical basis, which means that an introduction into the Saha Center is impossible or very difficult to carry out for important or compelling reasons. Meier says my words mean that, as I have already mentioned before, however, these issues should now be made clear. But now, I would still like to explain to you that it has turned out that the planned public presentations had better be omitted because the organization from the side of you all is so deficient that all of you would fall into large expenses, which you are not able to cover. Therefore, you all are advised to omit these presentations, so all of you are released from our conditions relating to this. For these types of enterprises, you all lack the appropriate organizational talents, as we were able to clarify. But it is now still advised to you that you finally free yourself from some workloads because too many things weigh on you which are detrimental to your own work. Billy says I know, particularly the regulation of the bookkeeping and the financial concerns always gives me a hard time. Meier says that is well known to us, and that is no doubt one of the main tasks that you should give up and pass on to someone else. The group members must concern themselves with handing this task over to other, loyal hands. But you should now also finally free yourself more and more from various manual activities because, as I told you, too many things weigh on you, whereby you are not able to do your own work or you can only do small parts of it. Billy says that's easily said, although you are right, but I simply see no solution. Meier says all group members must concern themselves with that because your health leaves more and more to be desired. Billy says it's now improving quite quickly, though. Meier says you aren't able to deceive me because I see the things much clearer then. Billy says oh, just leave it. Meier says it is, nevertheless, as I said. But now, I really have to leave. If I have transmitted the report to you and you have procured the time-measuring device, then call me. If possible, I will then come to you immediately. Billy says how long will it take with the clock and the control disc, until these things are regulated? Meier says it is a work of a few minutes, which, moreover, I can do alone. Billy says good, then I will say goodbye. Bye, girl, bye. Meier says till we meet again. Hope to see you again soon. The end.